The moon hung low over Aroko village, its silvery light spilling over the sleeping huts and winding paths, casting shadows like whispers across the thatched roofs. The evening air hummed with the laughter and music of the village festival, a celebration to honor a bountiful harvest. Everywhere, bright beads and colorful fabrics shimmered under the glow of oil lamps as villagers danced, their feet pounding the earth in rhythm, in gratitude for their ancestors' blessings. In the heart of the village, Madu, the healer's daughter, watched the celebration with a quiet, thoughtful smile. She had always loved this night, the way it brought the village together in joy and tradition. Though she was still young, Madu had already taken on much of her mother's duties, tending to the villagers' wounds, curing them with the knowledge of herbs passed down through generations. Tonight, however, she allowed herself a rare moment of freedom. While she stood at the edge of the dance circle, something or someone caught her eye. Across the square, a stranger stood, watching the celebration with an unreadable expression. He was tall and lean, with eyes that seemed to glow faintly in the moonlight, like embers that refused to die. His gaze was locked onto her, and Madu felt a chill, though the night was warm. Who was he? A stranger in Aroko village was rare. The villagers were a tight-knit community, wary of outsiders. Yet, as she met his gaze, there was something familiar in his face, a softness that made her pulse quicken and curiosity stir within her. He looked lost, perhaps, or maybe he was searching for something. Against her better judgment, Madu crossed the square, feeling an odd pull toward him. "You are not from here," she said softly as she approached. He smiled, and his voice was as deep as the night. "No, I am a traveler, a man without a home. I am Ikenna." His words settled over her like a thick fog, and she felt a strange pang of pity. Here, in her village, where everyone knew each other's names and shared each other's sorrows, the thought of being alone struck a lonely chord in her heart. Madu wasn't sure why, but she wanted to know more about this mysterious stranger, this man without a home. She gestured to the festivities, a playful smile breaking through her usual reserve. "Do you dance, Ikenna?" His eyes lit up, but he shook his head. "I do not dance," he replied, his gaze flickering as though he carried a secret. "But I would watch you dance if you would honor me with such a sight." A blush rose to her cheeks. It wasn't often that anyone, let alone a stranger, made her feel this way, flattered, curious, and warm all at once. Without thinking, she stepped into the dance circle, letting the music pull her into the rhythm. As she spun and twirled, her laughter mingling with the songs, she stole glances at Ikenna. He watched her intently, his face calm, yet his eyes held a hint of longing, of something deeper than a passing interest. After the song ended, she returned to him, breathless and flushed. They spoke late into the night, sharing stories of their lives, hers, filled with the routine of village life and the wisdom her mother passed on, his, vague and shadowed, like pieces of a puzzle missing their edges. He told her tales of lands she could only imagine, of forests darker and older than the ones that bordered her village, of rivers that flowed backward and mountains that sang. By dawn, Madu felt as though she had known Ikenna for years, though he remained an enigma. As the sun's first light crept over the village, he took her hand gently, his fingers cold despite the warmth of her skin. "I must go now," he murmured, his voice low. "But may I return to see you, Madu?" She nodded, feeling a strange ache in her chest. "Yes, please return." And he did. Over the next few weeks, Ikenna returned to the village, always at dusk, and always with stories for Madu alone. They would meet by the river under the spreading branches of the old Iroko tree, their conversations stretching long into the night. Madu felt herself falling like the leaves that drifted into the river's current, surrendering to a force she couldn't name. In time, Ikenna spoke of his admiration for her spirit, her strength, and her compassion. He listened intently as she described the plants she used for healing, how each root, leaf, and petal held a secret purpose known only to those who respected the balance of nature. He seemed captivated, his gaze never leaving her face. One night, as a heavy fog rolled over the river, he took her hands in his voice earnest and vulnerable. "Madu, I have no home to offer, no family to speak of. But I swear, in my heart, there is only you. Would you be my wife?" Her heart fluttered, the weight of the moment pressing into her chest. She had seen men propose to women before, always surrounded by family, with blessings and prayers. But here, it was only them, cloaked in mist and moonlight, bound by their silent understanding. "Yes," she whispered, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Yes, Ikenna, I will be your wife." In the days that followed, they arranged a small ceremony. Madu's mother, though hesitant, gave her blessing, though she could not hide the faint lines of worry that creased her face. On the night of the wedding, only a few close friends gathered as Madu and Ikenna exchanged vows under the ancient iroko, the air thick with the scent of jasmine and wild sage. Ikenna slipped a beaded bracelet around her wrist, whispering words of love and devotion. Madu felt complete, her heart swelling with a joy she had never known. But there was an odd chill in the air, a breeze that stirred the leaves with a strange, mournful song. The village elders, watching from afar, muttered amongst themselves. They noticed how Ikenna slipped away each dawn before the first light touched the earth, leaving Madu behind with only the faintest impression of his presence. They noticed how shadows seemed to stretch in his wake, darker, heavier than they should be. Yet Madu, blissfully wrapped in her love, saw only Ikenna, the man who had claimed her heart. She was his now, bound by vows and a love as wild and untamed as the forest itself. As the weeks turned into months, Madu adjusted to married life with Ikenna. Yet, there were moments when she found herself puzzled by his peculiar ways. He avoided the kitchen fire, preferring his meals cold. When she touched him at night, his skin was cool even in the heat of their embrace. He would stay up, staring out the window at the stars, his expression distant. One evening, as they lay in bed, she reached for his hand, noticing the way it seemed almost translucent in the candlelight. She blinked, startled, and it was normal again. She laughed it off, dismissing it as a trick of the dim light, but doubts began to settle in her mind, like a cloud casting shadows over her thoughts. Rumors began to drift through the village. There were whispers of strange occurrences, a farmer who found his crops withered overnight, animals behaving strangely, the elders murmuring of old tales and forgotten dangers. People began to look at Madu differently, with fear, pity, or sometimes both. One night, as she walked through the village to fetch water from the river, she overheard a group of women whispering near the well. "They say he only comes at night," one said, her voice low and fearful. "They say he has no shadow," another whispered. Madu's heart twisted. She wanted to shout, to defend him, but the words caught in her throat. Deep down, a part of her wondered if perhaps they were right. Her mother, too, seemed troubled. One evening, she handed Madu a small amulet made of herbs and stones, pressing it into her daughter's hand. "Wear this, my child," she urged, her voice trembling. "It will protect you from spirits who mean harm." Madu laughed, trying to brush it off. "Mother, Ikenna is my husband. He would never harm me." Her mother's gaze softened with sorrow. "Love, my child, does not always protect us from the unknown." Madu's heart wavered, caught between love and doubt. But love, she reminded herself, was the stronger force. She clutched the amulet close, feeling its weight, feeling its warning, and determined, once more, to silence her doubts. Days grew shorter, and nights colder, as Madu continued her life with Ikenna, yet the eerie occurrences persisted. Madu felt herself walking a tightrope between love and fear. Ikenna's peculiarities grew more apparent, and though her heart urged her to trust him, the village's unease infected her with creeping doubt. One evening, while preparing a late meal, Madu noticed Ikenna hovering at the doorway, his gaze fixed on the amulet she now wore around her neck. She had taken to wearing it daily, if only to appease her mother, but now she saw how Ikenna's face tightened, his eyes dimming as though shadows passed over them. "Does it trouble you?" she asked quietly, clutching the amulet in her hand. Ikenna's smile was weak. "It is a small thing," he replied, his tone strangely hollow. "But there are things, Madu, things that one day you may understand." Her chest tightened with a pang of foreboding. "What things?" Instead of answering, he turned away, his silhouette cast against the flickering firelight. For a moment, his shadow seemed darker than the rest of the room, as if it belonged to something not entirely of this world. Madu blinked, her heart racing, but the room was quiet again, and Ikenna had disappeared into the night. The following day, Madu went to the village elder, her heart heavy with unspoken questions. She recounted Ikenna's strange behavior in cautious whispers, the weight of her words pressing on her chest. The elder listened in silence, her face shadowed and grave. After a pause, she finally spoke. "Madu, my child, there are spirits who walk among us, beings who cannot find peace in the afterlife. Sometimes, they seek love, companionship, anything to lift the burdens of their curse." Madu's heart pounded. "Are you saying Ikenna?" The elder held up a hand, silencing her. "In the ancient tales, there are spirits who do not cross fully into our world. They find ways to appear as we do, to feel what we feel. But beware, for their love comes at a cost only the living must pay." The elder took Madu's hand, her eyes softening with sorrow. "Child, the love of a spirit is never meant for the living." Madu left the elder's hut with a heavy heart, her mind a whirlwind of doubts and fears. As the evening shadows fell over the village, she felt Ikenna's presence behind her, his steps light, soundless, like he was part of the night itself. She turned, her breath caught in her throat. "Ikenna," she began, her voice shaking. "Is there something you need to tell me?" For a long moment, he stared at her, his face unreadable. Then, as if a burden had been lifted, he spoke, his words soft as a sigh. "Yes, Madu, there is." He led her to the ancient Iroko tree where they had first met, its wide branches spread like open arms above them, the air thick with a strange stillness. Ikenna took her hands in his, and for the first time, his fingers felt cold, almost lifeless. "Madu," he began, "I was once like you, a mortal man with dreams, with hope. I was a warrior, bound to protect my people. But in my final battle, I was betrayed, cursed by a rival clan who wanted my soul to remain bound to the earth forever." Madu shuddered, feeling his pain as if it were her own. He continued, his voice like the rustling of leaves in the night. "I was cursed to wander, to never find rest, until I found love. Only someone who truly loves me can break the curse, freeing me to pass into the afterlife." Madu's heart ached as she understood the weight of his confession. She had married a man bound to the spirit world, a man who was neither truly alive nor fully dead. And now, he had asked her to be the key to his release. What does that mean for me?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "If you help me," Ikenna said, "there is a ritual, a dangerous one. It requires you to give a part of yourself, to offer up a piece of your soul. Only then can I find peace. Madu felt torn. Her love for Ikenna was as real as any love she had ever known, yet the thought of sacrificing a part of her spirit filled her with dread. She returned to her mother that night, confiding in her the terrible truth. Her mother listened in silence, her face pale and drawn. When Madu finished, her mother took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. "Madu," she said gently, "the spirit world is vast and dark, full of mysteries that the living cannot fully understand. To bind yourself to Ikenna's curse is to walk a dangerous path, one that may leave you forever changed." "But I love him, Mama," Madu pleaded. "I cannot abandon him to this fate." Her mother's gaze softened, her hand reaching up to brush Madu's cheek. "Sometimes love is sacrifice, my child. But remember, sacrifice is not without its price. The ritual may require more than you're prepared to give." Madu fell silent, the weight of her mother's words pressing into her heart. Still, the image of Ikenna's sorrowful face, his longing for freedom, haunted her. She could not turn away, not now. With her mother's reluctant blessing, Madu sought the help of a traveling shaman who had come to the village. The shaman, an old man with piercing eyes and a face weathered like the bark of an ancient tree, listened to her story and nodded slowly, as if he had already known. "There is a ritual," he said, his voice a low whisper. "But it is perilous. To free a spirit bound by a curse, one must journey to the spirit world. You will face shadows and guardians of the cursed realm. And there, you must prove your worth, offering up a piece of your own spirit." Madu swallowed, fear gripping her. "What happens if I fail?" The shaman's gaze grew dark. "If you fail, you will become like him, a spirit bound between worlds, forever wandering, forever longing. But if you succeed, he will be free, and you will be forever changed." Madu's mind swam with fear and doubt, yet love burned fiercely within her heart. She knew the risks, the darkness that awaited her. But for Ikenna, she would face it. On the night of the ritual, Madu and Ikenna journeyed deep into the forest, where the moon cast its ghostly glow over the ancient trees. The shaman drew a circle on the ground, placing sacred herbs and stones around it, and instructed Madu to step inside. He began to chant, his voice low and rhythmic, calling upon the spirits to open the gateway. As the chants grew louder, Madu felt a strange pull, a tugging deep within her chest, as though her soul were being drawn from her body. She closed her eyes, feeling herself drift into darkness, slipping between worlds. When she opened her eyes again, she was in a place that felt like a dream, a world of shadows and mist, where the trees whispered secrets and shapes flickered just out of sight. Ikenna appeared beside her, his form more solid here, more real. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice gentle yet filled with sorrow. Madu nodded, taking his hand. They moved forward, encountering strange spirits, beings bound to the cursed realm, who hissed and snarled as they passed. They seemed to sense her presence, her living heart, and they reached for her, their cold hands grazing her skin. But she pressed on, clinging to Ikenna's hand, her love guiding her through the darkness. At last, they reached the heart of the cursed realm, where a dark figure waited, the spirit of the clan leader who had cast the curse on Ikenna. His eyes gleamed with malice as he surveyed them. "Why do you seek release?" he sneered. "You chose your fate, warrior. Now, you want to escape." Ikenna remained silent, his gaze steady. Madu stepped forward, her voice strong. "He has suffered enough. I will give part of my spirit to free him." The spirit's eyes narrowed, his lips curling in a cruel smile. "Then offer it." Madu closed her eyes, focusing on the love that had bound her to Ikenna, the love that drove her to this moment. She felt a pain deep in her chest, a searing agony as if part of her very soul was being torn away. She cried out, but held her ground, determined. When she opened her eyes, she saw Ikenna, his face lit with a peaceful smile, his form beginning to fade, his curse lifted. "Thank you, Madu," he whispered, his voice like a breath of wind. "I am free." And then, he was gone. Madu returned to the village, her heart heavy and changed. Though Ikenna had found peace, she felt his absence like a wound that would never heal. She carried on with her life, but every night, she would find herself looking toward the forest, half expecting to see his shadow lingering there, watching over her. The villagers spoke of her bravery, her sacrifice, and her love. But Madu knew that some part of her soul would always belong to Ikenna, her love bound forever to the spirit of a man who had wandered between worlds.